morning, good afternoon, good evening. Tonight, we would like to start with a story of the Deputy Minister of Finance, Mr. David Mnangagwa, the son of the president, who is on the screen there. It's just confirmed that it is government policy to drip feed the ZWG. This is really annoying because the regime is now trying to control or to stop the hyperinflation of the local currency by making it scarce, hard to get. You have to fight hard to get the ZWG. This is shocking. Ben, what's your take on this?
Good day to everybody. I mean, these are just short-term measures and very, very painful measures, in terms of the general public. Like as you say, you can see in Zimbabwe, a lot of people cannot access this money. Not everybody has got, a bank account in Zimbabwe. We know mostly everything is run informally. So they rely on cash, unlike Western countries or developed countries, or maybe places like South Africa, where you find plastic money is the way to go. Zimbabwe has got no formal sector that is pretty strong, that people can actually use uh, you know visas and MasterCard. So the only reliance that is there that could work for them is using EcoCash or these mobile money transfers. But them too, they are very expensive in terms of transfers fees. So it's very, very difficult for the ordinary person, right? They rely on commuters. Commuters, they do not take these here kind of forms of payments. They want their cash. And now you're making it very difficult for people. And my question would be to the deputy minister to say, you're saying you want to drip feed the economy by giving it little by little by little. What will happen when you are done? Right now you're creating artificial demand. It's not, you don't have the clear picture of the demand for the ZWG. It's artificial. You're shortaging the market, currently. But then what will happen when this stops? And I think what exactly is going to happen. You're going to have this thing spiral out of control now, because there's now we're no longer dependent on that ZWG. And now you've got so much ZWG inside the economy. How are you going to address that? It's a short-term, fix. Let's look at the big picture. Let's fix what needs to be fixed, such that on the long term we don't have a problem with this. I think we should stop panel beating and putting patches on some of these policies that they make. I think it's actually just foolish. You're hurting the people of Zimbabwe, people that really depend on cash. He knows very well that our economy is very informal. Everybody is selling on the street corners. That is cash basis. There's no one that can go and swipe for tomatoes. There's nobody that can go and swipe to get from point A to point B. It's all cash. I think it's unfair and it's a bit selfish for him to think that this is a measure that is working, when clearly you can see that you're hurting the people, the ordinary person that has to queue up, that has to go through the inconveniences of trying to get to that to that money.
Well, there won't be a surplus of ZWG with this drip feed. All it means is the economy will continuously run on a situation where the zinc is very much in short supply. But like you correctly said, it affects the poorest the most because they do not have ready access to this eco-cash system. And so they cannot sell their tomatoes on the street corners using the swipe. And so they are being forced, or their economic activities being strictly restricted. And this is only for the sake of controlling inflation. And what is annoying about this is that the IMF officials were on the other day on record saying that Zimbabwe has managed to contain inflation. And they were even projecting that by the end of the year, Zimbabwe's rate of inflation regarding the ZWG would be as low as 7%. And what I find annoying is that the IMF is only looking at inflation and not how it was achieved. This is ridiculous. If you're going to achieve control of inflation by making it very difficult for the ordinary person to do their day-to-day economic activity, that is a pathetic solution. That is no solution at all. You're punishing those who are the most vulnerable in society because you do not want to address the fundamentals of that have fueled hyperinflation in the past, i.e., the failed economy. The Zimbabwe economy is all but collapsed. One of the things that everybody knows fuels inflation is reduced production. And so if reduced production is either you've got to reduce salaries, which you've done by failing to pay civil servants and teachers and so forth a living wage. And then in this particular case, by restricting the amount of cash available to do day-to-day activities, at least in the local currency. The US, those who have got access to the US dollar, the rich, they're able to do their business activities as they wish. This is totally unacceptable. And I've got the label there of the International Monetary Fund. In June, the IMF itself was the one arguing the Zimbabwe government to tackle corruption so that the economy would pick up. And then a few weeks later, the same IMF is praising Zimbabwe for containing inflation. If they tackled corruption, the answer is no. I think the IMF is letting countries like Zimbabwe down by coming up with all manner of comments, encouragement, where they should be putting their foot down and saying, this is an economy that is not working. You need to address these problems. Particularly their last report saying that Zimbabwe had contained inflation. That was an outrage. And now we have got the Deputy Minister of Finance confirming the same thing that we're arguing, that the regime is going to control inflation of the ZWG by making it very difficult to use that currency in the first place. And yet it's meant to fill in the gap affecting those economic activities by people who do not have access to the foreign currency, the US dollar. Those are the people who are most affected by this. And IMF should be the ones pointing out those serious failures. I hope IMF, in the light of this statement by Deputy Minister David Mnangagwa, is going to come back and review its own comment regarding ZANU-PF, this ZANU-PF regime containing inflation.
You know, why I was saying, you know, even no matter how much you drip, you know, you drip feed the money into the economy, at some point it's going to get to an extent where it's going to be enough, or it's going to get saturated. And then that will automatically, once it gets to that day, inflation would go up. Why? Like, as you said, as the IMF said before, you know, the problem is not how much money is in circulation in the economy. The problem is corruption. You know, are we addressing the real problem behind why we have devaluation of currencies and all this? I mean, it's obvious. Let's look at what is happening right now when it comes to government tenders, with government expenditure itself. Recently, you know, they called a commission to audit Harare, you know, City Council, and the first order of business was to buy, you know, Ford Rangers for the commissioners who haven't even started doing anything. It's already, you know, a burden on the people, on the economy. You're supposed to want them to try and find out what happened to the money and put back the money in its rightful place, which is within the economy. Here you are taking out already from something that is suffering and putting it out there. There's so many commissions, there are so many tenders that are being tendered out, and you know, the funny part is everything seems to be coming to light, so which means no due diligence was done previously. That is the corruption that needs to be addressed. That is the problem. That is what is fueling your inflation. You know, any other country in the world currently right now has got interest rates high up there to combat inflation. You know, that is the way to go, to try and reduce, you know, consumer spending by giving them savings, to say, you know what, you can save. If you want to borrow money, it's more expensive now. That is economically sound. This drip and all this here, it doesn't work. It's a short-term measure because you're creating artificial shortage. People have to battle to get the money, not because they cannot spend, not because they do not have the money in their accounts or you know, in their eco cash. They have the money, but you're not letting them have access to their own money. But that is foolishness. How are you supposed to encourage me to put money in a bank when I put money today and 3-4 days later I have business with that money? I cannot have access to it. I would not. Tomorrow you're not encouraging me to do that. So at the end of the day, even the banking sector will always suffer. Well, it's been suffering because, you know, everybody is operating informally. I mean, the lady that is, or the gentleman that is selling his tomatoes is not going to go and queue up by cabs to put his money in there. You know, that is how the economy of Zimbabwe is functioning. There is no industry to say, you know, and jobs to say that, you know, if at the end of the month you are getting paid. People are getting money as they go. If I have something that you want, we sell each other, we exchange. That's it. We are going. It's so informal. 90% or 97% of the whole of Zimbabwe is running through the informal sector. So by dripping or whatever he wants to say, I think it's just artificial. At some point, it's going to get saturated. You're going to find there is so much because the economy adapts. That's one thing. Life is never constant. it will adapt. There is no zig. It will adapt to something else. Eventually, you're going to find you're going to have more zig than what we want. Then what? Another quick fix. We are going to do this. We are going to do that. We are going to change. And probably the probability of having another currency is very high. Once they see that this one is not working, they remove it, look for another one, put it in place, and we must continue like that. Life, economics doesn't work that way anyway.
I think we have got a problem in Zimbabwe if we seriously think we can have economic recovery, much less economic prosperity, by coming up with these half-baked measures. The issue of containing inflation is important, but let's do the right thing. In this particular case, the right thing is ending the criminal waste of resources through corruption, reviving the economy, and all this gross mismanagement, etc., etc. But those problems will not be addressed until we have addressed the fundamental problem of politics. As long as we have got a regime that can rig elections and stay in power and is not accountable to anybody, ZANU-PF will stay in office and corruption will continue. Mismanagement will continue. Any idea that somehow we can think around with currencies and its availability to create the impression that the Zimbabwe economy is now stable, the currency is stable under these conditions is just misplaced. It's absolutely ridiculous. When the ZIG was launched in April, many of us out there said the hyperinflation will return. And in this particular case, the only way the regime has made sure that the hyperinflation does not return is by drip feeding the ZIG. All it means is that they will never, the drip feed, the ZIG will never lose its value because people hardly see it. But it defeats, I underline, it defeats the whole point of having this local currency. The whole idea was that the foreign currency could not meet all the cash requirements because unless you are involved in some economic activities that allows you to earn the foreign currency is very difficult to get. And even when you're allowed to use it, because of it's not readily available. I mean, if you look at the American dollar, where it's used in America, they have got the American dollar. They also have the coins for the small change. In Zimbabwe, you do not have the coins. You have got the dollar, the paper money. So if you buy anything that requires change, sometimes even if it means the change in small dollars, the individual will say, I have no more small dollars left. So what can they do? They end up giving you sweets or something else that you didn't even want. And that was the need for the local currency. And it filled in that gap. And now making it, that local currency, very difficult to get, is defeating the whole point. Why did you introduce it if you didn't want it? And this is just for the sake of making sure that we can say the local currency is holding its value. It's ridiculous. I think the people ordinary, this is a measure that is affecting the poorest of the poor in society, who do not have the same access to the foreign currency and to the eco-cash as the other people in the economy. And they are punishing the victims of this failed regime. And for an international organization like IMF to be coming up with a statement that seems to support the regime at the expense of the ordinary people is an outrage. Thank you very much. And I don't know, Ben, do you want to give your closing remarks there?
Yeah, in closing, I would say, I would address this to the IMF to say, it's hard enough surviving in Zimbabwe for the ordinary person, and it's very difficult when you heap praise, to say Zimbabwe is reeling in inflation, and you're not talking about the way or the means to how they are actually achieving this. It's very, very unfortunate that they would say such a thing. Especially we know that Zimbabwe is run on the informal sector. There is no employment. Unemployment is very high in Zimbabwe. Yes, they would say employment is 97%, but it's all informal, right? So at the end of the day, when you have an informal sector like that, money is exchanged, on a hand-to-hand basis. There is no banking. There is no other, what you would expect in a full functioning economy. So I think it's very unfortunate that they would heap praise when in actual fact the ordinary person that is actually living this here nightmare in Zimbabwe is saying otherwise. I find it very, very ridiculous at the end of the day. And to the minister, I would say, yes, you want to drip feed, but I say, it's just short term. Eventually, it's going to get saturated. Then what are we going to do? Print more, bring in another currency, because that's the only way to do it. I don't see any other way out of it. So at the end of the day, we may sing praise now, but in actual fact, we're just lying to ourselves. This is what we call artificial shortage, just trying to control by not giving people access to their own money, hard, small as it is, hard-earned money. That is very, very unfair. And I bet they have the access to walk in and get as much money that they want from any bank that they require. So that is very, very unfair, at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. And to the viewers out there, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I hope you'll be able to do it again tomorrow when we have another discussion. Thank you and have a good day.